Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, Robert Meyer Burnett. I invite you to watch and listen to the Designing Hollywood podcast, brought to you by Martika Ibarra and the great, legendary Hollywood costume designer, Marilyn Vance. I am afforded the wonderful opportunity of co-hosting the show. If you are interested in the magic of Hollywood, the design of Hollywood, the clothes of Hollywood, watch the Designing Hollywood podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts from, or find the video version on the John Campea YouTube channel. That's right, the Designing Hollywood podcast. Why would you ever want to miss it? Especially if you love the movies.
Robservations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
I've heard it said before, like, it was a very smart man named Robert Meyer Burnett who said the currency of our current age is authenticity. And it's so true.
Imagination Connoisseurs Unlimited, in association with Road to Perdition author Max Allan Collins, brings you the full-blown audio drama True Noir, the Nathan Heller Casebooks, based on the 19-novel series by Max Allan Collins, starring Todd Stashwick as Nathan Heller, once a Chicago PD officer turned private eye to the stars. You loved him as Deacon in 12 Monkeys. You loved him even more as Liam Shaw in Picard Season 3. But now hear him in the role he was born to play, Nathan Heller, in Max Allan Collins' True Noir. Look for it at a crowdfunding campaign near you.
Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier, sci-fi and cinema, your evangelist of the imagination, and of course, the perhaps never to be defined existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I am robcasting at you from the Robservatory. You members of this, the Post-Geek singularity community, you imagination connoisseurs par excellence. This is Robservations episode number 935. You know, I've been on YouTube now. In April, it'll be 9 years. 9 years. That's as many times as Ferris Bueller was absent. And I began, as many of you know, on a show called Collider Heroes. It was AMC Heroes when I started, then it became Collider Heroes, brought on by the late, great John Schnepp. And then, of course, that's where I first met John Campea, and I've been streaming with them ever since. And I began my illustrious, such as it is, illustrious YouTube career talking about superhero movies. The first, I think, 350 shows I did on the internet before I even started this channel was on Collider Heroes. I was on there with a lot of different rotating group of guests, people like Amy Dallin, Coy Jandreau, Comic Book Girl 19. It was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed doing that show, but we talked a lot about comic book films. Now, I have pretty much been a lifelong comic book fan. See, I was even dusting. You can see I was dusting. I've been rearranging the bookshelves, trying to make more room because I'm moving shelves around and stuff. I'm trying to make some more broadcast places where if I talk about action figures, I can shoot from over there. And if I talk about physical media, I can go over there. Or doing these shows here, surrounded by all the stupid stuff people are going to have to get rid of when I die. But I've thought a lot about comic book movies. Now, when I was 11, 1978, Superman the movie came out. And obviously that was really the first time. Now there had been serials. Like, I think one of the great 1940s adventure serials was actually The Adventures of Captain Marvel, the Shazam version of Captain Marvel. I think it's one of the great superhero. I still, to this day, yes, it's black and white, and yes, it's serialized. But a lot of fans out there, even watching me right now, might be surprised to know there was a Shazam serial made in the 40s. And there was. And it's really good. Of course, you have to go look at it and take into account when it was made. But I would say one of the coolest things about that, and what I always loved about that serial, is the Captain Marvel costume. It's a great superhero costume. But what I liked about it, and I've owned the serial in different formats. I've owned it on VHS. I've owned it on Laserdisc. I've owned it on DVD, I believe. I don't think I've ever owned it on Blu-ray. Maybe DVD was the last time I owned it. But a Burnett axiom, one of my axioms that I have come up with about the superhero movie, in order to make it work. Superheroes, by definition, it's wish fulfillment for us. Superman, created by two immigrant kids, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, Jewish kids, probably as a proxy of somebody they wished that they were, so they could, right wrongs, leap buildings at a single bound, all of those things. It's wish fulfillment. But one of the things that superheroes always sort of had, and to translate the superhero into the real world, I think the way to make superheroes work best, the Burnett axiom is, they have to have 1 foot in the real world. If a superhero has 1 foot in and when I say, I mean real world, REEL, in addition to the REAL, you have to believe. And the best superhero films have some kind of grounding in reality. And Richard Donner, and famously Mario Puzo and Tom Mankiewicz, who worked on Superman the movie, of course, they begin with just a massive sequence on Krypton, a crystalline version of Krypton, where crystal technology was used to build these just unbelievably huge structures, and even the clothing and everything. And very interesting alien civilization opened the movie. But then afterwards, when Kal-El crashes and his ship crashes to Earth, we're in the most Americana of Americanas, even though it was shot in Alberta, Canada. But we see a world that we immediately identify with. Wheat fields stretching back into the horizon. We have John Williams' incredible score. Glenn Ford, as Jonathan Kent. And we see... Now, you look back like when Clark runs fast by the train and young Lois sees him. Yeah, of course, the effects are dated. But for the most part, what sets the tone is sort of this amazing vision of Americana. This sweeping vision of if we didn't live through it, it's a memory of America itself that we all had, even as a kid in the 70s. I mean, I totally understood it. And you get it. The dream of that, the American, the Great Plains in a way, but the breadbasket of America, down home, Norman Rockwell, Americana. And then you had Glenn Ford talking to Clark and explaining the great conversation they have. And Glenn Ford says, "I know you are here for a reason." There's not the Smallville scenes are sweeping in scope, but they're very intimate in terms of the relationship that you see that Clark has. Of course, he's bullied because he can't let anyone know. I could make a touchdown every time, but he has to keep who he is a secret. I mean, all of that stuff was immediately relatable to us. So we knew Clark Kent, Kal-El, the man, the teenager, the man who represented all of us. The same way that Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, watching the twin setting suns of Tatooine, hearing the French horn from the same composer, John Williams, we were all Luke. All of us. We got it. And so what it firmly established in Superman was we understood where Clark was coming from, because we were all him. Even though we knew he was going to become Superman, they made us believe. You'll Believe a Man Can Fly. They made us believe in him as a person. And they set it in, there's no matte paintings. I mean, sure, we had some effect shots, but they shot on location. We believed because they made us believe. Richard Donner made us believe. Before we had to believe a man could fly, we had to believe that a teenager was real. And I think that for any filmmaker and Star Wars did the same thing. What was really interesting, in a way, if you look at the structure, in Star Wars, we meet the princess on the Tantive 4, and we see the blockade runners leaving trying to escape from the Star Destroyer, and Vader's troops doesn't make it. So we get the sci-fi goodness in the first 10 minutes. Holding her is dangerous. If word of this gets out, it could generate sympathy for the rebellion in the Senate. What is all that? We don't know. It's cool sci-fi goodness. Look, sir, droids, whatever. But we immediately leave the environment of that sci-fi, cool, futuristic, that goodness, and we find ourselves hanging out at home with a kid doing chores. So even though we're watching this unbelievable sci-fi extravaganza with some of the greatest cinematic world building up to that point that had ever been seen in a movie, we understood what was going on because we were Luke Skywalker. The filmmakers grounded us. And one of the things that I think makes Star Wars successful is the special effects are actually rather sparing. I mean, even when you're inside the Millennium Falcon, that looks like, what you would imagine a ship like that would look like. It was beautifully designed. The production design, because it was dirtied down, they made everything have a verisimilitude that we had never seen on screen before. So we believed it. The same way we believed Smallville and Superman. And once you make the audience believe, then you can take them anywhere. I mean, you still have to keep verisimilitude as you expand and sort of leave the ground. But at its core, we love Superman and we love Star Wars because we believed those characters were real people. Now, one of the great pitfalls of superhero movies up until, say, the year 2000 and Bryan Singer's first X-Men is that after Superman the movie, it was very difficult for filmmakers, for whatever reason, to make us believe in the characters because they didn't spend so much. I mean, Tim Burton's Batman. I have to say, to be honest, when I first saw it was a little disappointing. The movie's a little lethargic. I really appreciate the vision of it, but I never believed that the Bruce Wayne, Michael Keaton, I loved him as Bruce Wayne, I loved him as Batman. I didn't believe he was real. I was watching some gothic fantasy, some Elseworld story about Batman that was out of the mind of Tim Burton, who was an animator, a gothic kid, but it had no grounding in reality. But I liked it as an exercise. Now, something that I liked a great deal more that's celebrating its 30th anniversary this year came 5 years later in Alex Proyas's The Crow. Now, the interesting thing about The Crow, also very stylized, very Blade Runner-esque, a lot of use of miniatures, same with Tim Burton's Batman. But there was something about it because we got to meet Ernie Hudson's cop, we got to meet a girl, we had other characters. I mean, the villains are kind of silly, but I love them. And the movie has this incredible music, and it had the MTV sort of filmmaking style, and there was something about The Crow that it just worked. But you still had real people. Before Eric Draven comes back from the dead, you're set. I mean, yeah, it's a hellscape. It's an urban hellscape. But for whatever reason, there's a human element that you believe in. Now, what's so interesting about that is it's not easy to do. Now, we've now watched, and I would say that beginning with X-Men in 2000, when we meet Eric Lenscher being torn away from his mother at Auschwitz, and who would have thought to open a superhero movie in a concentration camp? But if you watch the first X-Men, there's a lot of goofy stuff in that movie. Toad, Sabretooth, the entire Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, and there's a lot of goofiness. But because we began in a grounded environment. Well, concentration camp being as grounded as it could be, but we also meet like Bruce Davidson, Senator, and there's enough when we first meet, and this is a brilliant conceit that Brian pulled off and his writers. Who do we meet? We meet Jean Grey lecturing, and we see Ian McKellen and Professor Xavier having a conversation. Two old guys, are you in my head, Charles? That sets the tone. It had gravitas, but we believe those dudes. We believe Charles Xavier and we believe Eric Lenscher, Magneto, in that scene because it was two dudes talking to each other and they conveyed everything we needed to know, grounding the film, forever grounding that movie. You could take us anywhere, and that film, you look back on it, it was the budget was a $75 million movie, but huge cast, big doings. Bryan Singer had never made a movie of that scope before, and he tried whenever he could to bring it down to earth and make it believable, which for that movie, the potential to spin off into oblivion was great. And I'll tell you something. I'll tell you a story. I produced the special features along with Dave Parker, who directed The Hills Run Red. We did the special features for that disc. And what was really interesting is that Lauren Schuler Donner, who produced the film, she ultimately thought the direction that movie went in was the wrong way to go. And she didn't have a lot of faith in the finished product because people who weren't comic book fans had a prejudice about what a comic book was. And what's interesting is for those people outside of comic books, people that haven't read comic books, they don't take them seriously. They look at them as lesser source material. Oh, and we have to come along and elevate it somehow. What those people don't get is that we are comic book fans, we the comic book aficionados, we take it very seriously. So the X-Men already had gravitas. It already had anybody who was a fan of the X-Men. I mean, you think back at that time, whether it was the Dark Phoenix saga, whether it was the graphic novel God Loves, Man Kills, the X-Men in particular, despite all the goofiness, Chris Claremont's run on that, which almost lasted 2 decades, gave us a very interesting examination into the plight of people that are, if you were LGBTQ, you could look at the X-Men as a metaphor for your own life, which Bryan Singer did not so subtly use. Can't you just try not being a mutant? All of that was definitely there, but anybody who was an outsider could relate. So when the MCU came about and we saw Iron Man for the first time, Iron Man, again, while we might not be a rich dude like Tony Stark was, we got it. There he was when that movie opens. He's in the back of he's going to demonstrate Stark projects, Stark weapons. He's cool. He's broing down with the hoorah with the military, and you immediately know who that guy is. Tony Stark's a real guy, and that's why it works. Now, this paradigm has been working for the movies now for a while. Christopher Nolan certainly nailed it with his Batman movies. He had the perfect balance of setting it in the real world, yet raising the stakes and making things crazy. But even his Joker as an agent of chaos was definitely, he was 9/11. He was a walking 9/11. And it all came out of that kind of imagery. Now, over at Fox, which was interesting, Fox had problems. Like, as much as I might enjoy watching the director's cut of Daredevil with Ben Affleck, the problem with that film is, what do you see first when that movie opens? You see a CG rat, and there's so much, it's like a combination. The problem with Daredevil is none of it, you never believe you're in New York City. You never believe you're either on sets or you're watching CG, and so it doesn't earn. Even the interiors, it's not like you're in the New York of Sidney Lumet's of The Verdict. It's all a construct, and it looks like a construct. So you don't believe it. But we've now had 24 years to see what what superhero movies work and what superhero movies don't. And I would say that Zack Snyder's Man of Steel began, again, even though same kind of thing, sci-fi Krypton, which was awesome, but when we get to Earth, you see young Clark set in the real world, kind of got that Americana vibe again, follows the pattern that happened in Donner's Superman, and you believe it. And when the Kryptonians show up, when Zod shows up with Feora and his military, we see what those fights would look like in the real world. Not too fantastical, even though Kryptonian powers, we saw the results of what would happen if two Kryptonians were battling over the skies of Metropolis, and it ain't pretty. But anyway, and then as Zack Snyder moved along, it became more of the grandiose sort of Götterdämmerung, Wagnerian sort of tableau, the painted Alex Ross tableau by way of, I don't know, Hieronymus Bosch or something. And while I enjoyed that, and I did, because it's fucking metal, you know. But now, with after the and what did the MCU do for the 23 movies of the Infinity Saga? Even Thor, coming from Asgard, but he had mom and dad, and he had a crazy sibling. So even that, even though he came down to Earth, yes, but you could believe in Thor. They humanized a god by giving him the same things that we had. Parental troubles, sibling rivalry, all kinds of stuff, and we bought it. You know, Captain America, the first Avenger, loved how it began. Captain America, very stylized, obviously, but what do you have? Steve Rogers as a scrawny kid, really good friends with Bucky. We knew it's a period piece, so the fact that it began in the 40s was fine. It all worked, but they still made us believe. Which brings me to Sony. Tom Rothman runs Sony. Tom Rothman ran Fox when they made X-Men and Daredevil and Elektra and Fantastic Four, Tim Story's Fantastic Four. He saw what works and what doesn't. And what's really interesting in animation, Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse, fantastic films. But because they're in animation, we see them differently. And what I haven't understood, I mean, I'm not a big fan of the Venom movies. I think we've seen 2 Venom movies. We're getting a 3rd one right now. But I think with Morbius, with Madam Web, and by the way, full disclosure, I haven't seen Madam Web. And then we're also getting Kraven the Hunter. So I don't really know why they decided to take characters from the Spider-Man comics and make movies without Spider-Man in them. I don't understand that. But what they failed to do with Morbius, even though they tried, the problem is we never got a chance to believe that Morbius took place in, say, a more grounded reality. It was a movie reality from the get-go. So were the Venom movies. Because, and there was no attempt made in Morbius or the Venom movies to make you believe in the real world the way that the most successful comic book movies of the last 20 years have tried to do. And again, my whole theory is that the more we can relate to characters and the world they live in, superhero characters, when superhero characters exist in an Anton Furst designed Gotham City like they did in Batman, they're less resonant for us as an audience. We don't identify with them as much because we don't identify with their surroundings. We don't identify with the environment, which I guess are the same thing. But we just don't identify because they don't live in our world. They live in it's kind of the same way that animation, you can get away with a lot more in animation because we're removed from it. Tim Burton's movies and Joel Schumacher's movies are I would say they're halfway between, even though I know they're live action, but try and go with me here. The way we perceive those movies is somewhere in a nether realm between animation and live action. They exist. I know they're live action, but there's no verisimilitude. When you see the Batmobile driving up the side of a building, it's like, okay, this is not our world, which I think means it makes us care less. If we're younger, maybe not so much, but as we get older, Now we get to Madam Web. I was perplexed, and I know we joked about this when we ran this joke into the ground. I was perplexed of the idea that Sony would make a Madam Web movie at all. Pretty obscure character, even in the Spider-Verse. Interestingly obscure powers that, there's time travel, psychic powers, all kinds of stuff. And then at the same time, when I started to see the trailers, once it was tangible and we saw that it was a real movie, no one was really impressed with the trailers, because immediately the characters were in situations where it seemed very contrived. Again, we're back to movie world. This movie takes place in movie world, where there's no connection to real life. It kind of looks like, okay, it's the real world, kind of, but it's all this jumble of stuff where you don't believe it. You don't believe it from the announcement that they're making a Madam Web movie. And that's a problem. Now, having not seen this movie, and to be honest, I don't know if I ever will see this movie, but I'd like to read this article. It's a review that was in Rolling Stone magazine today. And here it is. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut off the top here, but I have to share this. I just have to share this headline because I want you to take a gander at it. Madam Web isn't as bad as you've heard. It's so much worse. Yeesh. This comes to us from David Fear. Trailers are designed to stir up excitement. The amuse-bouche whets your appetite for the 3-course meal. Occasionally, the oldest marketing trick in the book backfires. When Sony dropped a sneak peek of Madam Web, the newest addition to the company's roster of Spider-Man-related films and another of their corporate crossovers with the good folks at Marvel Studios, the reaction was not exactly what they hoped for. The same fans they were hoping to get riled up about a batch of fresh Spidey-adjacent characters began to mock the clip, ripping into everything from Dakota Johnson's extremely decaf line readings to the curiously low-rent look of the visuals. One deadpan line of dialogue: "He was in the Amazon with my mom when she was researching spiders right before she died," became a meme in all the wrong ways. Blood was in the water now, and the amuse-bouche had somehow become chum. Some of the merciless shit-talking could be chalked up to old-fashioned fanboy misogyny. No, it couldn't, but okay. With online trolls ready to tear apart anything even remotely associated with lady superheroes. First of all, I'm very tired of that. No one is going to tear anything apart with lady superheroes. If the lady superheroes are in good movies. No one objects to lady superheroes, certainly not men. What we object to is lady superheroes that are not well-written characters, like we would object to for any character that's not well-written. You didn't see a lot of think pieces written about how Black Widow and Scarlett Johansson was, oh my God, such a pandering character, not when she was introduced the way she was in Iron Man 2. But anyway, I digress. The fact that the movie revolved around one of the more obscure players in the Spider-Verse didn't help, making it feel as if Sony was scraping just above the bottom of the barrel. And the odd mix of hyperventilating crash bang boom business and a lack of wattage from the cast made everything feel like it was one step away from parody. An SNL fake trailer disguised as a real one. It pinned a kick me sign on the film's back, which felt blatantly unfair. Yes, the teaser wasn't selling this would-be blockbuster well, but wait until you see the thing you make until a final judgment call, people. Well, having now seen this tangled-up IP gossamer firsthand, we can say that Madam Web isn't as bad as its somewhat botched promotional campaign might suggest. It is, in fact, way worse. A genuine Chernobyl-level disaster that seems to get exponentially more radioactive as it goes along. This detour to one of the dustier corners of Marvel's content farm is a dead end from start to finish. It is The Cats, the movie of superhero movies. Not a single decision seems of sound mind. Not a single performance feels in sync with the material. Not a single line reading feels as if it hasn't been somehow magically been auto-tuned to subtract emotion and or inflection. The sole amazing factor of this Spider spinoff is that somewhere, someone signed off on actually releasing it. All of which boggles the mind, because it isn't like they skimped on bringing real talent on board. Johnson, the A-lister cast as a paramedic turned precognitive matron Cassie Webb, it's short for Cassandra because, of course, has gone from being the 50 Shades of Grey ingenue to a major actor. See A Bigger Splash, Suspiria, The Lost Daughter, Persuasion. Sydney Sweeney is a rising star, who, by the way, her rom-com with Glenn Powell's made $150 million. Who would have seen that coming? No one. Sydney Sweeney is a rising star who seems to keep ascending higher and higher. She's one of the 3 20-somethings cast as teens. The other 2 are Isabella Merced and Celeste O'Connor, who are mysteriously drawn together with Webb and will become a trio of future Spider women. Ever since he broke out with the 2009 French prison drama A Prophet, Tahir Rahim has demonstrated screen presence to spare, and you'd think he'd nail a deliriously evil villain like the power-mad Ezekiel Sims. Adam Scott, Emma Roberts, Mike Epps, Zoza Mamet, and Halt and Catch Fire's Carrie Bichet drop by as well. Director S.J. Clarkson's resume reads like Prestige TV 101, having helmed episodes of Succession, Orange is the New Black, Dexter, Jessica Jones, and a prequel pilot for Game of Thrones. That, by the way, I think it was called Blood Moon, with Naomi Watts. Didn't get past the pilot stage. And yet, from the moment that the Spirit of 73 preamble in the Peruvian Amazon forests forces Bichet's Constance Webb to monotonously recite stats about a rare arachnid whose peptides can cure hundreds of diseases, you can tell something seems off. It only gets worse when Rahim, already one mustache twirl away from tying a damsel to the railroad tracks, begins musing aloud about Las Arañas, the region's spider-men who whiz across treetops. These superpowered strangers happen to be real and deliver Cassie when her wounded mom dies. By the time we fast forward to New York City circa 2003, when Johnson's now grown Cassie is an EMT along Scott's Ben Parker, and she begins shrieking out orders with the enthusiasm of a subway announcer, there's already the overwhelming smell of a turkey wafting into your nose. We'd like to pause for a second to single out the surname of Adam Scott's character. Note that his sister Mary is pregnant, though she hasn't disclosed the baby's name yet, and reflect that while he has no desire to be a dad, he's very much looking forward to being Uncle Ben in the kid's life. Wink, wink, nudge, wink. Then the trinity of hell-raising skate rat, Maddie Franklin O'Connor, mousy goody two-shoes Julia Cornwall Sweeney, and characteristic, apparently to be decided later, Anya Corazon Merced come into the picture, and not even the infusion of youth and promise of eventual costumed heroics can defibrillate this thing to life. The same goes for Rahim's bad guy crawling the walls in an all-black Spidey suit, which doesn't really jibe with any sort of cinematic universe timeline, to be honest, but why get hung up on the details? As for Webb's powers, she can see unprompted visions of the future, ranging from 30 seconds to 5 minutes ahead of schedule, which the movie keeps rendering via jittery repeats of a DOA scene you've just suffered through once. Such intense bouts of deja vu are matched only by the feeling of disbelief happening on the other side of the screen. The best thing about the future is it hasn't happened yet, someone intones near the end of Madam Web, and indeed you look forward to a future in which this film's end credits, which, spoiler alert, are sans stinger scenes previewing coming soon plot points, even Sony was like, yeah, enough of this already, are in your rearview mirror and gone from your memory. Or an alternate world years from now, in which this unintentional comedy of intellectual property errors has been retconned into a sort of cult camp classic, a Showgirls of comic book cinema. No, because Showgirls had Paul Verhoeven directing it. Until then, you're left with a present in which you're compelled to cringe for 2 hours, pretend none of this ever happened, and ruefully say the words you'd never imagined uttering. Come back, Morbius. All is forgiven. Now, one thing I've realized is growing up, I would see everything. I would see movies, whatever the studios were releasing, whatever the indies were releasing, whatever foreign films I could go to. I would see anything as a kid. Now, I loved horror, I love fantasy, I love science fiction, but I saw everything. My favorite movies weren't even necessarily genre films. My favorite movies were movies like All That Jazz, which remains one of my top 10 favorite films of all time. Or Sidney Lumet's aforementioned The Verdict, which every time I watch that movie, when James Mason and the villainess is revealed, I cringe every time, hoping maybe this time it's going to go a different way. But those are the kinds of movies I love. Movies that were firmly set even when they were fantastical in the real world. Reading the description of this movie, everything about superhero films that I think work, meaning you have to set something firmly in the real world. And that doesn't mean you're in a jungle looking for spiders. It means whatever is happening, you as an audience need to believe it. And that is a situation that no one's going to find themselves in. It's just a wacky thing. It's not like Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is set in the 30s, and when you watch the opening of that movie, the way Steven Spielberg stages it, and the way it's written, and John Williams' score, they make you believe because all you are is in a forest. There's no matte paintings, and the forest looks real. It's all in silhouette, and then, I mean, the way Raiders works, and in a talented filmmaker can make you believe you're outside. You're filming this, I think in Hawaii, and then you get to go to a Hollywood soundstage and be in this temple. But it's okay because they've already made you believe that you're in South America in 1936. You're believing it because they made you believe it. But Madam Web, you could tell just from the trailers the way it looked, the way it was lit and shot. There wasn't a shred of reality in that movie. Now, the question that I have is, why make this film? Who is it for? Now, we know, they even redeemed Andrew Garfield's 2 Spider-Man movies. I like Andrew Garfield. I loved him as Spider-Man and Peter Parker. I did, and I thought that his first Spider-Man movie with the Lizard was pretty good. The next movie was all over the place. Again, the tone between Electro and Gwen Stacy dying and everything was all over the place. I didn't buy it. It felt like a 90s superhero movie. But bringing it back in Spider-Man No Way Home, all of that stuff worked because the foundation was already laid, so you could get away with all that stuff. And there was a lot of real-world concerns like what happened to Aunt May. But what I don't understand is, how does a studio like Sony decide to make Morbius, Madam Web, and Kraven the Hunter? And admittedly, Kraven the Hunter looks good to me. But after this, I don't know why. See, here's the thing. I always say here's the thing. It's my catchphrase. I say it too much. A movie, here's another axiom. A movie needs to have some kind of an intellectual hook that interests you about the story that's being told. And it doesn't matter what genre film is. There has to be something that is inherent in the story itself. Call it the log line. That makes it like, I want to find out what's going to happen in that story. Well, with Madam Web, what is that? I mean, that's something that you can ask yourself. Why is it, other than the fact that it's called Madam Web and it's part of the Spider-Verse, what about the movie makes you want to go see it? It certainly wasn't in the trailers. I thought they might do something interesting with, the character of Madam Web as portrayed in the comics is far more interesting than what seems to be going on in this movie. But how do you turn that into a compelling story? Clearly, they didn't really know how. And I don't understand. Somebody needs to explain to me what Sony's business model is, because if you have a cinematic universe and you're trying to build a cinematic universe around your Spider-Verse, every time you make a bad movie in that universe, you diminish the entirety of your intellectual property. And now Sony's Spider-Verse, and the Venom movies, let's face it, are pretty goofy, and they're not for everybody. They made money. but they're not something that, you know, people return to again and again and again because of the way they are. They're goofy fun if you like that sort of thing, but I don't think they're anyone's favorite movie. So the question that I have is, why have they decided to go this route? What are they doing? You've now made 2 films that are openly mocked. I mean, this movie hasn't even opened yet. And it's, I mean, I don't know if a movie's been so dead on arrival. Maybe The Marvels was dead on arrival too. You know, I watched The Marvels the other day because it was on Disney Plus. And again, I was watching it more from a anthropological point of view. Like, what the hell is this? And again, it does not ground, the film is completely off the rails from the very beginning when Dar-Ben is on the surface of what looks like the moon looking for, you know, everyone's favorite wristband, and immediately don't care. You're in an artificial environment with a bunch of artificial people that look artificial, and the environment looks artificial. There's nothing that you believe, and they dig up this thing, and already I would argue that, and you can like Captain Marvel, you can like the Marvels, but I would argue that from the very opening of that movie, you're out. There's no reason to watch it. And from an intellectual standpoint, who cares? It certainly doesn't feel like it really ties into the Marvel Cinematic Universe in any way. I mean, other than, okay, they're swapping places and all this, which was entirely dumb, especially after what we've seen. It's hard to believe watching the Marvels that they somehow are connected to Infinity War and Endgame or Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Yeah, unbelievable. And the real question is, from a creative and business standpoint, I don't know why this is. I mean, I really don't. I don't know in what boardroom, who made the decision to greenlight this particular movie. In what universe did somebody say, hey, let's make a Madam Web film? And the thing is, if there was an amazing take in this movie, it has 4 writers, obviously the director they picked. Here's another thing. TV directors are very different from feature film directors. TV directors are usually not writer directors. TV directors, they call them traffic cops. But a television show is the brainchild of the showrunner, the creator of the show. And a director comes in, a good TV director, by the way, essential, but a good TV director comes in, shoots the show the way the writers want them to, deliver the coverage, deliver the performances, they do a cut of their episode, and then they're out. And the producers and the showrunner, they finish the episode. The director doesn't. The director's off to another show, hopefully. So bringing in great TV directors to make feature film directors, it's usually the other way around. Feature film directors, after a few films, usually nowadays go into TV because it's such a pain in the ass to get movies off the ground anyway. But the idea that you're going to bring on, and admittedly a very accomplished, the director of Madam Web is a very accomplished TV director, worked on all these Tiffany shows, which is great. But Madam Web somebody should have come up, there should have been a writer-director who had some auteurist vision or take on this. Who decided to make this movie? And was it a pitch? Did Sony figure it out themselves? I don't know, but I really want to know, because nothing here, and according to this review, is any good. And even the idea, we were mocking the idea on the John Campea show when they announced that they're making a Madam Web movie. I joked they're making a Madam Web movie for months, for a year. I'm still joking about it, even right now as I talk to you. I don't understand the reasoning. Because what they've done, what Sony has done, even before this movie opens, not only do you diminish your custodianship over the Spider-Verse that you own, especially coming off of a banger like Across the Spider-Verse. I mean, what are you hoping to achieve? You got Morbius, which is a joke, a meme. It's Morbin time. You've got now Madam Web, and you're leading into Craven and the R rating and the violence, and Aaron Taylor Johnson looks great, ripped as Craven. But again, if you're a comic book fan, when you think of Craven, at least the way I think of it is I think of Craven's Last Hunt. Craven is irrevocably tied to Spider-Man. So you now have 3 movies, and I'll bet you that I don't know what the box off. I mean, I don't know what the budgets of those three movies were, but I bet collectively close to $200 million, probably. For why, as Chris Carr would say. Why would you make these movies? And what did you hope to achieve? I mean, Morbius could have been like if you'd made it this ultra violent like Craven's Last Hunt or the Craven movie. How do you make a Morbius movie and there's barely any blood in it at all? It's almost like it was all edited out. I don't understand it. Now I want to read another review, and this was in the trades. This was in the Hollywood Reporter today by Lovia Garkey. And look at this headline. Madam Web review. Dakota Johnson leads a depressingly inert Spider-Man spinoff. Depressingly inert. My God. I can't. Depressingly inert. I would much rather have somebody say that I made a movie that was a spectacularly awful film with no redeeming value than to call it inert. Yeesh. There's something so demoralizing about lambasting another underwhelming Marvel offering. Who would have thought 3 years ago a review would begin with there's something so demoralizing about lambasting another underwhelming Marvel offering? Marvel was the most successful franchise in Hollywood history 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And now we're getting this. What is there left to really say about the disappointments and ocean floor level expectations created by the mining of this intellectual property? Every year, studio executives dig up minor characters, dress them in a fog of hype, and leave moviegoers to debate, defend, or discard the finished product. I mean, as an opening paragraph to a review, I mean, this is attacking an entire genre that for 15 years delivered, since 2008, delivered the goods, man. Brought in more money than Hollywood knew what to do with. Madam Web is one of these recently exhumed efforts. The film, directed by S.J. Clarkson and starring Dakota Johnson as a clairvoyant paramedic in New York, has as much energy as an employee subjected to an icebreaker during a corporate retreat. It is an airless and stilted endeavor driven by a mechanical screenplay written by Matt Sazama and Burke Sharpless and Claire Parker and Clarkson. Its lack of imagination would be astounding if it wasn't so expected. When Sony dropped the trailer 2 months ago, the early reactions were nothing short of brutal. Responses to the 3-minute video effectively summarizing the film turned the obvious dialogue into a meme. Madam Web opens with a prologue. I'll skip you all that. It gives you the plot scenes. Early scenes likely sketch Cassie's life in New York. She grew up in foster care and keeps a suitcase of her mother's photos, letters, and old journals underneath her bed. She hardly makes plans, preferring to stay home with her cat. Johnson initially seems like a fine match for the role. Cassie has a droll sense of humor, and many of her lines land thanks to Johnson's deadpan delivery. The actress is strongest when Cassie navigates socially awkward situations with a chaotic honesty. There's a particularly funny scene in which she dampens the mood of a baby shower. But when the film requires Johnson to bump up the energy, the 50 Shades actress stumbles. After trying to save a man whose car flipped on the highway, Cassie falls into the East River. The near-death experience activates her clairvoyant powers and kicks off the intrigue of the film. Already misanthropic, Cassie now feels even more alienated from society. She walks through the world with a heightened sense and nagging deja vu. Clarkson experiments a little here, using slick effects and off-kilter angles to underscore Cassie's changed worldview and state of unease. And then it just goes on and talks about the plot. The cat and mouse dynamic between Ezekiel and Cassie plays out routinely. If there's one interesting thing in Madam Web, it's how the film navigates the post-9/11 personal security landscape. Through Ezekiel's villainous planning with his assistant, Madam Web shows how much privacy civilians voluntarily gave up or the United States government took, all in the name of national security. It's a rare, satisfying element in a film that otherwise fails to deliver at every turn. I would say that Captain America, the Winter Soldier, might have been the final word needed about our surveillance culture post 9/11. But I guess, did they see that movie? I don't know. All I know is that this movie bums me out. I don't, and I think that there's a misnomer amongst people who look at YouTubers and especially online film pundits and say that we're full of vitriol and hate. We're not full of vitriol and hate. What we are full of is disappointment. Now, we've learned to express our disappointment through vitriol and hate. But we look at these things, and I'm telling you, Hollywood, we all want to love these things. We do. You can even take what you think is the most hateful YouTuber around. That YouTuber loves things. Loves Star Wars, loves The Winter Soldier, probably loved X2, loves The Crow, probably loved the first Blade, and the second Blade with Nomak. But we want to. But it's astonishing to us, we who have been immersed in all of this stuff for literally our entire lives. We're astonished when we're given stuff like this. We ask ourselves, I mean, I sit in the room I'm in right now. I'm entirely encircled by all kinds of things that would help you find your own way, whether it was Star Trek, Star Wars, Marvel, Doctor Who, Basic Instinct, take your pick. It's amazing to me that we wind up with this kind of drivel. And it shouldn't even be us that is as mad as the people that are shareholders at these companies. I mean, I really don't understand the kind of decisions that are made that lead to these kinds of things. How has this happened? Why has it happened? Who is to blame? And why do they keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again? You know, it's funny. I watched it was an Instagram reel. No, it was a YouTube reel that George Lucas was talking about not dealing with studio executives. I mean, I don't think that there's ever been a time in history where the people that are making decisions about what gets made and who makes these things has more disconnect with the actual products, because now we don't have very many really great, talented auteurist filmmakers left. I mean, I read something today that said David Fincher might be working on a remake of Squid Game. I'm like, that's sad. I mean, I would watch it because I love David Fincher, and I think he's one of the great auteurs that's working today. But I'd much rather see him give me something like Zodiac than to remake Squid Game. I mean, are we ever going to get a movie like, remember what it felt like to see The Terminator for the first time, or see The Crow for the first time? Hell, seeing John Wick for the first time in a theater, and that wasn't too long ago. I don't understand entertainment, and I don't understand at the studio level who is making these decisions. You know, I know of one producer who I greatly admire, and that producer, who sends me scripts to read, always seems to have great scripts. Like, and I used to read scripts for a living, and I know how hard it is to find them, but this one producer, I mean, he's got a long track record, and he's making deals all the time, And sometimes the things that he produces are really, really good. Sometimes they aren't, but they're really no fault of his own. He finds great material that should be good. But I don't understand who gets these jobs. Who at Sony thought, yeah, let's make a Madam Web movie? In what universe? Or in what multiverse? I don't know. But we need great films. We need great studio movies. You know, I think back to the amazing diversity of the kinds of stories being told in the 80s, where go back and take a look at the studio movies of the 80s. It's not like they were all great, but there was a lot of creativity and a lot of diversity in terms of genre. You had comedies, you had dramas, you had fantasy, you had horror, you had science fiction. You had all kinds of movies being made. Now the problem is the studios have only one way to do business. They want to spend a ton of money on IP, and they're hoping that by spending $150 million to $200 million, they'll make $1 billion. Not with this. Not with this output. And I don't understand why not. Why are you guys, why do you not know not to make Madam Web? Because Madam Web diminishes everything. First of all, it diminishes your IP. It diminishes the careers of everybody that worked on this movie. I mean, they all hoped it would be good, and they took the jobs because you probably paid them very, very well. But at the end of the day, what did you come up with? Who decided this? You damaged Disney and Disney's Marvel. You damaged the character of Madam Web moving forward. And I mean, in a way, this is kind of catastrophic. This is your IP is now taking on water. If it were a battleship, it would have been hit by a torpedo, and it's taking on water. Maybe they can seal off the decks and you won't sink, but the damage is done. And I just don't get it. And it bothers me. It depresses me. And I don't know how it happens. But anyway, and I have no answers. This is called Robservations, not Rob Answers. So I just wanted to muse a little bit. And you know, what do you guys think? And you know what? I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to see this movie because there's a lot to learn about the business and about choices and about storytelling. And I'm going to see this movie. And maybe there's something I can look in and find it and say, hey, you know what? That's not bad. Or I enjoyed that. But I'm going to see it. Listen, before I get to letters, I have some great letters, including one from Max Allen Collins himself that I'm going to read. Let me just jump in here and see if anybody has anything to say about this. Maybe somebody out there can offer some insight into what the fuck was going on with this movie. And why did it get made? So let me go back. Hunter Becknell says, happy birthday, Rob. I just don't know. I have missed out on this. It started last night. As a matter of fact, my birthday is on May 15th. I don't know where this came from. Sidhu says, can we find that awesome sci-fi script I read on the blacklist? No, you can't. You can't. And that's not me going, no, you can't find it. It's not on the blacklist. It is not. For those of you who are asking, I read a script that has already been sold. It was a spec script written by someone who shows great promise, who might have already shown great ability, but someone who shows great promise, and it's an incredible sci-fi horror script that had one of the most intriguing plots I've read in a long time. And I promise you this, you will see it, but probably not for 2 or 3 years. But and when it comes out, don't let anyone spoil it for you. Thomas Logan says, Bobby, you got to watch something to critique it. That's why I'm not critiquing it. I was reading other people's critiques of it. But you already, I mean, I can already tell you that this movie wasn't going to work after seeing the trailer. And the thing is, so could all of you. And by the way, so could Sony. David Jaffe sends in a super chat and says, Sony just needs to keep the license, and no one seems okay telling Amy Pascal she no longer has her finger on the pulse. Well, while she's part of the Spider-Verse, she's no longer at Sony calling the shots. So Scott Bartholomew says Nolan needs to direct a Trek movie. I would love to see Christopher Nolan direct a Trek film. I'd love to see him write it as well. He won't, but I would love that. RRTNZ says, even today, the best scripts are ruined by DEI. Probably. I mean, hard to say in the case of this movie, but I mean, I think it's fine. But again, even the talented actresses they cast in this movie, didn't matter their ethnicity, but just this group of 4 girls getting caught up in whatever these shenanigans are, again, didn't seem real believable, even on the page of the trailer. Irene Jobson says, "Happy birthday, Rob." Thank you. Thank you. I whatever that means. Thank you for my birthday months in advance. I'll take it. And Irene, I'm so happy you're still with us. So it's all good. I hope you're feeling better. Scott Bartholomew says Sasquatch Summer by Ari Aster. Now, Ari Aster is producing it, presenting it, but he didn't make it, from what I understand. Yeah, it looks great. Go watch the bonkers trailer for Sasquatch Summer. Oh, my God. Crazy, crazy, crazy. 1001 Johnny sends in a tip and says, could you explain what makes a B movie good? I've heard these Sony films are like superhero B movies. It makes me wonder about Roger Corman being known as a B film director, but he's a very talented director, right? Well, that's a very interesting question. I think a B movie, not an A-list movie, but a B-list movie, again, I would make them... here's what's really interesting. A movie like The Verdict, which I keep going back to The Verdict, or All That Jazz, or even Tootsie, which is a comedy, take your pick. Even something like those movies are, the material is elevated. It has something great to say. The genre elements are sort of they seem to be important movies that are telling stories that have real resonance, and they rely less on genre tropes. But I think a B movie, The Terminator is a B movie. You know, a super soldier, a machine, a destructive cybernetic organism, actually a machine covered in artificial human skin goes back in time to kill a soldier from the future who falls in love with a girl on Earth. All of these things are very much genre trope things. But if they're really well done, you know, you take pulp material and you elevate it and take it seriously. Those are what the great B movies are. They usually don't have as much money as an A-list movie. But what's happened is a lot of studio movies have now become B movies that have a lot of, I would say, franchise pictures. The Marvel Cinematic Universe are B movies taken to A-list status, which is funny because then when you see an A-list, now that the comic book movies are A-list, when you go back down to a B movie, like the Shazam movies are B movies with A-list budgets. The Flash, in a way, the way it was done, and I like The Flash, sue me, was totally a B movie. Captain America, the Winter Soldier, was a B movie elevated to A-list status, if that makes any sense. Battle Beyond the Stars, total, not only was it was made in the wake of Star Wars, it's a Magnificent Seven / Seven Samurai movie, but it was made by Roger Corman, you know, a New World, but it was written by John Sayles. The script was great. The actors were great. Everybody knew what they were making. They took it seriously, but the filmmakers knew how to combine a funny yet serious script, and they were walking a tonal tightrope, and they did a great job. I mean, another great, I think John Carpenter, he lived in the B-movie arena. And sometimes he got A-list budgets and elevated his B-movie sensibilities. And don't get me wrong, I love B-movies, and so do we all. But the best B-movies can be just as good as any movie. You know, it's more of a genre thing than anything else. But yeah, I think that's the difference, Johnny. I don't know if Roger Corman was ever a great director, but you know, he certainly, I mean, his Corman, the Edgar Allan Poe stuff he did was pretty good. Actually, I really liked it. The Legolas says, "Happy birthday, Rob Sensei." I have so missed this joke. I still don't know what it is. Aaron Sleeper has become an imagination connoisseur. He's joined the channel as a member. Thanks, Aaron. I appreciate that. Dan Candy says, "Hey, birthday boy, what starship is that on the shelf behind you?" Which starship? I can't even begin to guess which starship you're looking at. Okay, I can point. So this right here, here's an Eagle transporter from Space 1999, a rescue Eagle, of which I have many. There's a regular Eagle right up here. Over here is the Enterprise E. That's a Art Asylum Enterprise E. Down here are different Star Trek ships. These are shuttles. That's an Akira class. I don't know. You can't see it, but this is the saucer section of the Enterprise B. Yeah, there's all kinds of things here. So, what can I say? You guys are so funny. 1001 Johnny says, "Watch it, Rob. I'll pay it through a tip. If you hate it, I'll pay you for 2 tickets." Well, 1001 Johnny, that's very nice of you. That's very funny. But anyway, I got letters to read. I didn't go through all the letters last night. We have a lot of letters, and I've got a good one from Max Allan Collins. Now, Max Allan Collins, he took over writing Mickey Spillane's Mike Hammer from Mickey Spillane, and he's the executive producer now of a potential Mike Hammer film at Skydance, which could be very exciting. And of course, I'm working with Max Allan Collins to turn his 19-novel series, the Nathan Heller case books, into an audio drama that he's also writing. Now, Max wrote me a letter. He writes me letters. He's very loquacious. He's a great writer. But I was very surprised to get this letter from Max this morning about last night's show. And here's what Max Allan Collins has to say. "Rob, to use one of your favorite words, bangers, is the best way to describe your recent Robservations episodes. I watched the first half of your letters episode last night and watched the rest this morning. It was alternately brilliant and hilarious. But your response to the letter writer who talked about wanting to break the jaw of a one-time bully who apologized was a stunning example of your ability to be insightful and articulate on the fly. Like you and your correspondent, I was bullied as a kid. I was small till I sprouted in the 8th grade, was a smart-mouthed wise-ass who wore glasses and was one of the rare males who was among the best students at Muscatine High School. Most good students were female in the schools I attended, and I suspect that may still be true. Being bullied had a lot with me. Being bullied had a lot to do with me eventually playing football, where as a defensive guard I could level supervised revenge upon any number of people. I had numerous fist fights all through junior high, and sometimes after. I came to think I had the kind of face people love to punch. There's no question that the revenge aspect of Mickey Spillane's work led me into loving Mike Hammer, starting at age 12. And revenge, getting even, remains a part of my own fiction, though I hope I treat that element with some of the insight you displayed responding to the letter writer. No question that I've worked some of that out in my fiction, because I am of the opinion that nonfiction and essays are where writers go to share what they think, and writing fiction is where writers go to find out what they think. By the way, my preferred pronouns are I and me. Max, I usually joke to people, I say my preferred pronouns are I, me, and mine. As you obviously realize, and I have often said, where the far left and the far right meet is at a book burning. They're just bringing different books. Your thoughtful take to another reader who objected to the cavalier use of Nazi was spot on. But yours was a response, obviously, to someone who appears to be an intelligent, thoughtful person who has somehow ignored that the Nazi term has come into too common parlance because, shall we say, the fish rots from the head down. And the ludicrous use by that gall darn younger generation of genocide in regard to the very group on the planet who have suffered 6 million doses of actual genocide would be amusing if it weren't so alarming. You and I, Rob, are similar in many ways, and that is why I suspect I'm drawn to your YouTube shows. It may be an example of my own self-absorption, the me thing you talk about so much. Of course, artists, a term I don't like to refer to myself as, but use here because it's nonetheless appropriate, are inherently self-absorbed and sort of have to be. What fascinates me is where you and I are different and yet have arrived at much the same place. I stayed in my hometown. You went to Hollywood, yet we both were consumed by our love of Trek and movies and books and both made indie films. I took the path into hard-boiled crime fiction when you went into science fiction and fantasy, though we are both fairly well aware of and have enthusiasms for each other's chosen genres. I stayed in the Midwest, but because I was in a regional rock band, I went to all sorts of places. We opened for the Turtles, who I got to know a little, Flo and Eddie, that is, and Peter Noon and the Grassroots and the Del Shannon and all the big acts, and appeared at comics and mystery cons in big cities all around America. My mystery fiction took me at other people's expense to Italy and the UK, though I had to turn down a France trip to stay in America shooting Mommy's Day with Patty McCormack. But unlike you, I let my passport lapse. Always willing to re-up, though, if someone else is paying. I married the beautiful Barb in 1968 to get her away from a mentally ill parent, whereas you obviously, your sly little boy smile is telling, have, shall we say, gotten around. I have written about dozens of very different women in my fiction, but frankly, they're all Barb, who has many more facets than the small diamond I bought her in 1968. But I ramble. I am so delighted by the absurd coincidence that I live 30 miles from Mike Bodden and Imagination Connoisseurs Central, leading us to doing an ambitious project together. I've just completed the screenplay for the indie movie I hope to make this year, and now my desk is cleared to start scripting our audio adaptation of my Nathan Heller novels. Max. You may read this on the air if you like. No obligation. Well, Max, thank you very much. It's my honor. I read your Batman comics in the 80s. They had great covers, too. And I've read more of your work. And by the way, Max Allan Collins put out a comic that I read in the 80s called Miss Tree, like Mrs. Tree, but Mystery, which is actually really good. He co-created that with Terry Beatty. And I'd love to develop a TV series of that show because it would be great. Blake Lively. If you want to do a TV series, Miss Tree for you. I'm telling you. Ever since Age of Adeline, I've wanted to put you in something else. And why not as a kick-ass private investigator who goes up against the mob and becomes embroiled with them? Why not? But thank you for that, Max. I really appreciate the kind words. And it's always great hearing from you and to read your wordsmithing, which I very much appreciate. So thank you very much. So let's see what I'm going to delve into that I didn't delve into last night. Before I read another letter, a lot of people have continued to... Aaron Sleeper says, Rob, if looks could kill, young Richard Grieco, excellent B-movie and one of the best Bondsploitation movies ever. I worked on that movie. That's right. When I worked at Warner Brothers Feature Production, we were making that movie. William Deere, directed that film. And that movie's a lot of fun. And you are right. If you guys have not seen If Looks Could Kill, it's a lot of fun. It's a movie that is surprisingly forgotten, but it's a lot of fun. Hunter Becknell says, okay, Rob, I think TJJ started the jokey last night to tell everyone to tell you a happy birthday in the chat. Tom Jr. Jackson said that. I think we just wanted to see how long it would go. Well then, happy birthday to me. I'll take it. Dan Candy says, happy anniversary, Bobby. Here's to 34 more. You guys are crazy. You guys are wacky and nutty. And I'm there for it. And I appreciate it. So thank you. Now let's see. I got more letters. What do I got? This comes to us from Tracy. World in Pajamas, as we know her by. From me in my PJs, she says. Dear Rob, what a weird life I have led. All my life I wanted to be a scientist, but lately I've been questioning my ambitions. It's not that I dislike science, but I think I love something more. I enjoy using my imagination in writing stories. The book I'm involved in has given me much happiness. I can understand why you love making movies. The thrill of designing characters, worlds, adventures, romance for a new film, it's very addictive, I get it. I've always loved reading books, but I never thought of writing one. Isaac Asimov was a chemist who became a science fiction writer. He used his knowledge to create brilliant stories that are still being read today, which have been made into TV series, plays, movies like I, Robot. I think that is where I want to go next in my life. I know I won't make much money writing books. Many people rarely do today, but it's something I've become very passionate about. I've read stories by Gaiman, Gaskell, Arthur C. Clarke, many genres, even poetry and factual books with varying subjects from ancient history, science to biographies. My stories will be very sci-fi. I'm still going to do my podcast. However, I'll need a day job, so my plan is to move into teaching, which will fund my endeavors. Watching your show has helped me see an audience of people who are interested in reading sci-fi. You've recommended many stories to your viewers to look at, which I admittedly have done. This channel has made a huge difference for me. Thank you for that. You're always encouraging people to make art, and it's not impossible to succeed if you're willing to work hard. I've learned so much from yourself. It's also good to know that I am not the only wacky person in the world who is not embarrassed to say they dabbled in goth music. Nick Cave and I went crazy in the clubs. Wow. Have you ever seen Wings of Desire? One of my favorite movies of all time. Nick Cave is in that and sings. And that song, The Carney, is a pivotal point in that movie. I also have to say I'm looking forward to having a career in teaching, and it does tie in with my podcast, talking about science. Very excited about my next adventure and where it could lead. Once I've finished my book, I will definitely send you a copy. It might not be the best book you've read, but know it will be made with happiness. I actually think one of your talents is to inspire people, imprinting your love of the cinema, books, comics, music, etc. for the viewer who is thinking of getting involved in these areas. To have courage, regardless of color, religion, sexuality, culture, or how you even identify, one can be an artist. It may not have paid the bills or made you a millionaire, but I believe you have had a positive effect on many lives. I wish you the very best, and I will buy you a drink one day. And I will drink it, and I will then buy you a drink, and we can trade off and buy each other lots of drinks. What a very nice letter. That's very nice of you to say, Tracy. Look, I think that's what I've always tried to do is share my enthusiasm. I love it when people are making stuff. There's nothing that gives me greater pleasure than to either make stuff myself or be around people that are making things. You know, like my friend Lucas Kendall, when he decided to make his first short film, a movie called Skyfighter, and he asked me to edit it. I really enjoyed working on that movie with him. I thought it turned out quite well. You can watch it. The Dust channel bought it. It's got over 2 million views on YouTube. And, you know, Lucas crowdfunded that movie, went out and made it. And, he had his own record label, Film Score Monthly, but wanted to transition into writing and directing. And I thought he did a heck of a job with very little money. And that's the thing. There's no reason why people can't do that. Max Allan Collins, he just made a new movie. and he's been making movies, and now he's going to make another one. There's nothing to stop anybody. We now have the technology. You can make whatever you want. I mean, if you think you're going to go out and make Oppenheimer out of the gate, that's not going to happen. But that doesn't mean you can't make something that's a great B movie. I mean, everybody starts somewhere. And I love that, whether you're going to write. We are, by the way, we are doing the short story contest. We're probably going to launch. Here's how it's going to work. We're going to open up. So for those of you who don't know, a couple years back, we put out a call. I decided to have a short story contest. I'm going to publish a book, an anthology. One of the dreams in my life was to publish an anthology that I could edit and also contribute a story to. And it's going to be called, it's always been called, The Imagination Connoisseurs. And the premise behind The Imagination Connoisseurs is to somehow define what it means to be an imagination connoisseur in some way. I'm not saying you can write a story about anything. It can appeal to imagination connoisseurs. It can help define what an imagination connoisseur is. It can be a story about how you became an imagination connoisseur, or it can be a story that imagination connoisseurs would inherently love. I'm not going to put a limit on it. I just want the stories to be great and not written by AI, which is very actually easy to find if people have, which we have to do. I don't want people to use AI, but they have to be good. So we started that, and the stories that have already been submitted are going to be put into play. And what we're going to do, the fee is going to be kind of exorbitant to enter because I'm giving the stories all to a professional editor to read first. And if the stories that we like, the editor will then work with the authors to do any rewriting that needs to be done or put it all together. And then what I'm going to do is take all the stories and I'm going to crowdfund the book because I can't afford it. What I want to do is I want to print 3 different versions. So we'll have, and really I only want to print one, but I've always wanted to do, I love high-end hardcovers. So I want to do a hardcover, dust-jacketed, slip-cased, signed version of the stories. And the stories are going to be 10,000 words or less. And we're probably going to launch the short story competition maybe at the end of the month. And it's probably going to, I have to figure it out. I got to talk to my editor. It's probably going to be $50 to enter because we want serious people. If it was like $10 to enter, people just toss off AI stories. And that's why I heard that from somebody. You got to make your fee exorbitantly high so it weeds out the people that aren't serious. And I agree. So that money is just going to go to the editor. So that's what's going to happen. And we're probably going to open that up March 1st. We're going to have a Beware the Ides of March thing. So if you want to get writing, we'll probably have it open maybe till July or August. And then I want the book to come out for the next holiday season, for next, the Thanksgiving. So they'll be ready to go for Christmas. So there'll be the hardcover version, there'll be the softcover version, and there'll be the digital version. And there's also, I'm going to have a call for artwork as well. Whether it's pen and ink drawings, whether it's painting, something that'll be nicely reproducible on color stock in a book. So think about it. If you've ever wanted to write a short story or you fancy yourself an author, think about that if that's interesting to you. And the people that have already submitted the stories, we have all your stories. You are grandfathered into this competition. And I wouldn't call it a competition. Is it a short story? I guess it would be a contest. Well, we're just looking for great stories. So here's your again, the maximum would be 10,000 words. But I mean, if you want to go a little over, we're not going to, if it's a great story, well told. So, Tracy, I thank you for saying that. I very much appreciate your kind words, and I can't wait to see what you come up with. So we'll see what happens next. And congratulations on wanting to move. I'm always reminded, my favorite Dear Abby letter. Do people even know who Dear Abby is anymore? That freaks me out if they don't. So Dear Abby, Ann Landers and Dear Abby, they were Abigail Van Buren. They were advice columnists that were actually sisters. And so I read Dear Abby religiously. I started reading her when I was a kid. I loved Dear Abby's column because I felt I am a sucker for like Slate's column, whether it's advice or sex or whatever. Give me or Dan Savage. I'm a sucker for advice columns. I'll read any advice column about any subject. But my favorite advice column ever was a woman who wrote into Dear Abby, and she said, I'm 40 years old. I've always wanted to be a doctor. But if I were to start school and go through medical school and go through my residency, I'm going to be 50 years old before I ever become a doctor. And Dear Abby's advice, and again, I'm paraphrasing, but Dear Abby's advice was so simple and so right. And she said, you're going to be 50 anyway. Meaning, you can be 50, or you can be 50 and be a doctor. If you're going to be 50, what would you rather be? And I thought that was the greatest advice ever. Simple, to the point. You're going to be 50 anyway. You're going to be 60, you're going to be 70, doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter. The point is to live a full life. And nowadays we have the ability to pretty much do anything you want. So why not start now? Who's stopping you? This comes to us from our friend Mario Lopez in Portugal. And he says, actually, there's three things here. Mario Lopez writes, the death of a character in a film. Hi, Rob, and our beloved fellowship of the Post-Geek Singularity. Today, I come to talk about something that is increasingly difficult to see done with meaning. I'm talking about the death of a character in a film. I really don't like to see the death of good characters, but the truth is that when it happens, and it's done well, it marks us in a way that we can never forget. I'll give some examples of how this was done well in films I've seen throughout my life, and yes, spoilers are coming. I will try and use the names of the characters, but sometimes I'll have to use the name of the actors. Boromir, Theoden, and Gollum in the best trilogy ever. All the deaths in Saving Private Ryan. Jack Dawson in Titanic. Neil McCauley in Heat. Tony Montana, Scarface. Sonny Corleone, The Godfather. Sergeant Elias in Platoon. Spock in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. Leon in Leon the Professional. Maximus in Gladiator. Hector in Troy. Jack in Oblivion. William Wallace in Braveheart. Kane in Alien. Superman in Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. Wolverine in Logan. Michael Clark Duncan in The Green Mile. Gwen Stacy in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Thelma and Louise. Vasquez and Gorman in Aliens. Uncas Major Duncan and Alice Munro in Last of the Mohicans. Drew Barrymore in Scream. Saoirse Ronan in The Way Back. Haley Joel Osment in Pay It Forward. And to finish, all the deaths in Infinity War and Tony Stark and Natasha Romanoff in Endgame. Rob, I left these two films until the end because, in my opinion, the characters who died in Infinity War should never have been resurrected. But worse than that, it was the creation of the multiverse that made all of these deaths smaller, or even insignificant. One last question. What was the death of a character in a film that had the most impact on you? For me, it was Boromir. Kind regards, Mario from Portugal. Well, I'll tell you the death in a movie that left me slack-jawed and staring at the screen in disbelief. It was late, I want to say it was either November 1st, it might have been November 1st, 1985. And when Secret Service agent Richard Chance was shot in the face, the hero or the anti-hero of William Friedkin's superlative To Live and Die in L.A., I couldn't believe it. I had no idea it was coming. And I love that movie, as everyone who watches channel knows. I have an inordinate love for To Live and Die in L.A. Thank you, Kino Lorber, for that 4K. Finally, when he was shot in the face and killed, I was stunned. I'd never seen anything like that because it happened so fast. And I was like, wait, what? That, to me, that was the one that freaked me out, man. I'd never seen anything like that. I couldn't believe it happened. I was like, but really, the one that really got me the most was Spock. Spock dying. And the death scene, I couldn't believe it. But it was Kirk's eulogy that made me tear up. First time in my life I cried in a movie. Now, Mario goes on. He says, errata 1. Sorry, Rob, a little mistake. Where it says Saoirse Ronan in The Way Back, it should say Saoirse Ronan in The Way Back and The Lovely Bones. Oh, good call, good call. And then I think you had one more. Yes, you do. One more. Errata 2, where it says Saoirse Ronan in The Way Back, it should say, oh, you already, okay. And Rutger Hauer in Blade Runner. And then he resends his letter with all those extra characters. So, well, I hope, Mario, it's a really interesting question to ponder. Of all the deaths in film, what put them in the comments below. What were the deaths that got you? So what were they? I'd love to know. So this letter comes from Drew Lehman. Drew Lehman says, an over-reliance on analytics. Hi, Rob. I've been watching Robservations for a long time now, and I really appreciated your thoughts on movie companies relying too much on analytics and how that would eliminate the magic of discovering great movies that analytics could never predict would be hits, which is exactly the kind of thing I'm learning about in a book I'm reading right now called Alchemy, The Dark Art and Curious Science of Creating Magic in Brands, Business, and Life by Rory Sutherland. If you haven't read it, I would recommend it since it's related to what you've been talking about. The author talks a lot about an over-reliance on analytics leading to so much uniformity. The same types of products and people will emerge successful from this type of approach. He has some good advice for decision-making in order to cultivate more diversity and, surprisingly, more equity than we get in the current system that tries so hard to be fair. Yet, due to the attempts to eliminate human judgment, we wind up being very unfair to so many people and overlooking what could be great talent simply because they can't get past our preset criteria in the analytics. Anyway, it's an interesting read. Love the show. Keep up the great work. Well, Drew, that's great. I love it when people send in these things. Once again, the name of that book is Alchemy, The Dark Art and Curious Science of Creating Magic in Brands, Business, and Life by Rory Sutherland. I would be interested in reading that book. Yeah, I mean, I've never understood that. I mean, I think that's one of the great problems with Hollywood now. And again, I go back to somebody like Ryan Coogler, who wanted to make a Rocky offshoot, went to Stallone, pitched it, and we got Creed. Now we have 3 Creed movies, all because, I mean, the analytics probably would have told him to not do that. You know, I think that's a great example of somebody who went in and made something happen that wouldn't have happened if he listened to people. So, pretty exciting stuff, which I'm there for that. I'll buy into that. Hovland Star says, happy birthday. Thomas Logan says, tell Irene why she must watch Mulholland Drive. Well, I could say I could give you 2 reasons or 4 reasons, but let's just say there's a very hot and steamy lesbian scene in that I know, Irene, I know you like to bring on the filthy. So for no other reason, there's one for you. But also it's a beautifully made, very intriguing film that will not leave you anytime soon. You will ponder it for quite a long time. And I think you'll really enjoy it. But that's how I've enticed you. That's what will get you in the door. It's very well done. Thomas Logan says, a more painful death, Gomer Pyle Hartman or HAL 9000? Interesting. 2 Kubrick deaths. Gomer Pyle or Hartman, would you believe that Gomer Pyle is the death of Wilson Fisk, our own Daredevil's own kingpin? But yeah, believe it or not, Vincent D'Onofrio or Hal 9000. That's sad. Hal's sad. Hal's death is sad, but he doesn't really die. He just gets turned off. He comes back. Murray Reich says, I just came out of watching Argyle and it was meh. Story was all over the place. Twists and turns gave me so much heartache. Bryce Dallas Howard and Sam Rockwell were good, but what the fuck was that ending and credit scene? They thought they were going to make a trilogy. I guess they're not going to. I don't know what to tell you. That's you know, what can you do? What can you do? I don't know. I'm very curious to see what you guys all think of Madam Web, so I hope you do and come back and leave what you have to say on the chat. This comes from Lorenzo Fletcher. Lorenzo Fletcher says, Sony Pictures merger with Lionsgate. Hi, Rob. Here's a kicker for you. This could very well happen one day, but what are your thoughts on a merger of Sony Pictures and Lionsgate into a new company called Sony Pictures Lionsgate? I've also designed a logo for it. What would you call it? Thanks, and ride the road to 1,000. I mean, they're both kind of independent in their mindset. I kind of like the idea that Lionsgate and Sony don't merge, that they continue to be their own companies as long as they keep putting out things that keep them afloat. I'd like to see them stay separate. But after Madam Web, maybe Sony's looking to merge with somebody. I don't know. But yeah, Sony Pictures Lionsgate, or it could be Lionsgate, a Sony company. But I think, though, that Sony being the deep-pocketed company that it is, it might be, that's probably what it might say. It would say Lionsgate, a Sony company. I don't know if it would ever be Sony Pictures Lionsgate, but it might. But I don't know. I don't know what that would look like. So, very, very interesting. So we shall see. This is, I think I'm going to stop there. I'm going to stop here. I think we're all caught up. I'm caught up with what everybody said. Read some great letters. So I want to thank you all. I'm going to end this stream. I want to say thanks to everybody. Please like and subscribe if you like these shows. Subscribe, hit the the bell. I've been doing this for 5 years. I don't even know, almost 6. You know what to do if you like that. And if you want to write a letter, postgeeksingularity.com. Write a letter, and I'll read it on the show if it's appropriate. And yeah, so there you go. I'll be on the John Campea show tomorrow on the John Campea podcast. So check me out there. I'll probably be back. Haviland Star says, sincerely doubt we're going to see a Spider-Woman movie with the Jessica Drew version. Wouldn't you have loved to see... Like, okay, where's that movie? Why wouldn't they make a Jessica Drew Spider-Woman movie? The costume alone. I don't understand. Like, I really don't... I don't understand the call when they could have done a Jessica Drew Spider-Woman movie. Or any number of characters. Why not Spider-Man Noir? Or Spider-Ham. Peter Porker, the spectacular Spider-Ham. Spin that off into an animated film. It's so weird to me. Or make a Spider-Gwen live-action movie. Or a Miles Morales live. I mean, I know they're doing well in the animated movie, so, I'm sure. Take your time. But I'd love to have seen a Jessica Drew Spider-Woman movie. I don't know, man. Why not? Anyway, on that note, I want to thank Tom Jr. Jackson for being a great moderator. Thank you very much. I want to thank everybody for generously supporting the channel via Super Chats and tips. Thank you for that. And to all the new people, the new members and the new subscribers, welcome. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. And yeah, I'll see you guys on the next video. Indeed. And remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen.